Hello and welcome to another chapter of the Lost Years of Merlin, Book 2. This is called The Seven Songs of Merlin. This is chapter 20, called Rivers Cool and Warm. In the last chapter, Merlin spent a bunch of time trying to carve this rock and then realized that the best way to protect something is to let it free. So he learned his next song of protecting, and now I think is the fourth song. So, Rivers Cool and Warm. By the time I found the others at their camp by the headwaters, not far from where I left them, we had been separated for more than 3 full days. The meadow grasses, painted several shades of green, rippled in the breeze. Seeing me approach, Rhea ran to meet me. Her worried face relaxed as soon as she glimpsed the third marking etched on my staff. She touched my hand. I was so worried, Merlin. My throat tightened. With good reason, I'm afraid. You told me I might get lost, and I guess I did. You found your way back, though. Yes, I replied, but it took me too long. 10 days, no more, remain. Bumblebee joined us, almost tripping on his cloak as he hopped over the splashing stream. Although he wore his usual stack of frowns, he seemed genuinely glad to see me. He clasped my hand and shook it vigorously, jangling his bells in my ears. Then, sensing that he was about to try again to tell his famous riddle of the bells, I turned and walked away briskly. Both he and Rhea followed. Before long, we had put some distance between ourselves and the realm of the dwarves, yet far more distance lay ahead. For the fourth song, naming, had something to do with the Slantos, a mysterious people who lived at the extreme northeastern tip of Finkyra. While to get there we would not need to climb any more snowbound passes, we would have to cross the entire breadth of the rusted plains. That alone would take several days. Then we would be hard-pressed to find a route past the sheer cliffs of Eagle's Canyon, not to mention the northern reaches of the Dark Hills. And while I knew that danger lurked in all these places, it was the notion of crossing the Dark Hills that left me the most unsettled. To cross the plains, we rose each day at dawn. When the first morning birds and the last evening frogs sang together in chorus. We stopped only occasionally to pick berries or roots, and once, thanks to Rhea's ability to speak the buzzing language of bees, to eat a bit of honeycomb dripping with sweet syrup. She also seemed to know just where we might find water, leading us to hidden springs and quiet pools. It was as if she could somehow see into the landscape's secret mind as easily as she could see into my own. The moon offered enough light to trek into the night, so trek by moonlight we did, across the sweeping plains. Yet the moon, like our time, was quickly disappearing. Finally, after 3 long days, we reached the edge of the Eagle's Canyon. We sat on the rocky rim, gazing out over the broad stripes of red, brown, maroon, and pink that lined the cliffs and buttresses. Gleaming white pinnacles protruded from the opposite wall. Far below, a shallow river snaked along the base of the cliffs. Tired though I was, I couldn't help feeling a rush of strength when I recalled the stirring cry of the canyon eagle that had marked the beginning of the great council of Finkyra. If only I could soar like an eagle myself. I could sail over this colorful gorge as swiftly as the wind, just as I had done, ages ago it seemed, on Trouble's feathered back. But an eagle or a hawk I was not. Like Rhea and Bumblebee, I would have to descend into the canyon by foot and find some route up the other side. With my second sight, I followed the line of cliffs, searching for some way to cross. We were, at least, far enough north that the walls were not completely impassable. Farther to the south, they lifted into a yawning chasm that sliced through the very center of the Dark Hills. Rhea, the most sure-footed of the 3 of us, led the way. She soon discovered a series of narrow ledges that crisscrossed the cliff walls. By following each ledge until we found a place to drop down to the one just below, we gradually moved lower into the canyon, sometimes sliding on our backs, sometimes climbing over crumbling outcroppings. Finally, soaked with perspiration, we reached the bottom. The river, though muddy, was much cooler than we were. Bumblebee, sweltering under his thick cloak, plunged straight in. Rhea and I followed suit, kneeling on the round stones that lined the river bottom, soaking our hands and rinsing our arms, splashing water on each other. Once, though I could not be certain, I thought I heard the distant screech of an eagle from somewhere above us on the cliffs. At last, feeling refreshed, we began the arduous climb out of the canyon. Before long I needed to use both hands and thrust my staff into the belt of my tunic. As the slope grew steeper, Bumblewee's grumbling grew worse. Yet he struggled to keep up, climbing just below Rhea, finding his handholds in the footholds she had just vacated. As we scaled a particularly steep buttress, my shoulders ached from the strain. I leaned back as far as I dared without losing my grip, hoping to glimpse the top of the canyon wall. But I found only more layered maroon and brown cliffs rising far above us. Glancing below, I viewed the muddy river, which seemed no more than a thin trickle on the canyon floor. I shuddered, tightening my grip on the rock. For as little as I wanted to climb upward, I wanted even less to tumble so far downward. Rhea, who was slightly to my left on the buttress, suddenly called out, "Look, a shar on the pink rock there!" Careful not to lose my balance, I turned to find a light brown, kitten-like animal basking in the sunshine. Like a cat, it lay curled into a little ball, purring quietly. Unlike a cat, it had a pointed snout lined with soft whiskers and 2 paper-thin wings folded across its back. The delicate wings fluttered with every purr. "Isn't it lovely?" asked Rhea, gripping the wall of stone. "Shars are only found in high, rocky places like this. I've seen only one before, from much farther away. They're very shy." Hearing her voice, the shar opened its blue eyes. It tensed, watching her intently. Then it seemed to relax. The purring resumed. Slowly, Rhea shifted her footholds. Then, grasping the crumbling cliff with one hand, she reached toward the creature. "Careful," I warned. "You might fall." "Shh! You'll frighten it." The shar shifted slightly, placing its furry paws on the rock as if it were preparing to stand. Each of the paws had 4 little toes. As Rhea's hand came nearer to its face, the shar's purring grew louder. Just then I noticed something strange about the paws. At first I couldn't identify what it was. For some reason they seemed a bit odd. All of a sudden I knew. The toes were webbed, like the feet of a duck. Now why would a creature of the high rocky canyons have webbed feet for? In a flash I understood. "Don't, Rhea! It's a shifting wraith!" Even as I started to shout, however, the shar began to transform. Quick as lightning, the wings evaporated, the blue eyes reddened, and the fur became scales, and the cat's body changed into a serpent with dagger-like teeth. The air crackled as it threw off a brittle, transparent skin, like a snake that is shedding. All this happened in the blink of an eye. Hearing my shout, Rhea had barely enough time to duck before the serpentine creature, jaws open wide, leaped at her face, claws extended. With a savage scream, the attacker flew just over her head, plunging into the canyon far below. Although its jaws missed her, the shifting wraith's tail whipped against her cheek. Thrown off balance, she lost her footing. For an instant she clung to the buttress with one hand, swaying precariously. Then the stone beneath her hand crumbled. She fell, right on top of Bumblebee. Clinging tight to the rock face, his fingers turning white, the lanky jester howled at the impact. Yet somehow he held on, managing to break Rhea's fall. Still, she was left hanging upside down on his back, struggling to right herself. "Hold on, Bumblebee!" I cried, watching them from above. "I'm doing my best," he groaned, "though that's never good enough." Suddenly, the stone supporting his hands broke loose, splitting into shards that clattered down the cliff. The 2 of them screamed in unison. Arms and legs flailing, they slid down the rock face, striking a narrow ledge that stopped their fall. There they hung, high above the canyon floor. Like an ungainly spider, I climbed down the cliff, my staff swinging from my belt. Rhea and Bumblebee were sprawled just below me on the ledge, moaning painfully. The jester's bell-draped hat lay beside him, covered with red dust. Rhea tried to sit up, then fell back, her right arm dangling at her side. Working my way across the narrow ledge, I reached her at last. As I helped her sit up, she gasped as I brushed against her twisted arm. Her eyes, full of pain, searched my face. "You warned me, just in time." I wish it had been a few seconds sooner. A sudden flurry of wind sprayed us with dust from the cliff wall. After it subsided, I took a pinch of herbs from my satchel and dabbed the scratch on her cheek. "How did you know it was a wraith?" "The webbed feet. Remember when we found that alea bird in the forest? That was when you showed me that shifting wraiths always have something odd about them." I indicated myself. "A lot like people, I suppose." Rhea tried to lift her arm and winced painfully. Most people aren't that dangerous. Moving carefully on the ledge, I came around to her other side to get a better view of the wounded arm. It looks broken. And let's forget about poor Bumblebee, the jester whimpered. I did nothing useful, nothing at all. Despite her pain, Rhea almost grinned. Bumblebee, you were wonderful. If my arm weren't ready to fall off, I'd give you a hug. If only for a moment, the dour jester stopped moaning. He blushed ever so slightly. Then, seeing her injured arm, he frowned with his brow, cheeks, and chins. That looks rather bad. You'll be incapacitated for life, never able to eat or sleep again. I don't think so. Gently, I laid the arm across Rhea's lap, feeling for the break. She winced. What can you do? There's nothing, oh, that hurts, around here to use for a splint. And without two, arms, it's going to be impossible climbing out of here. Impossible, echoed Bumblebee. I shook my head, knocking some pebbles from my hair. Nothing is impossible. Bumblebee's right, protested Rhea. You can't fix this. Oh, even that satchel of herbs can't help. Merlin, you should leave me here. Go on, without me. My jaw clenched. Absolutely not. I've learned more about binding than that. We are together, you and I, like these two hawks on the wind. A frail light flickered in her eyes. But how? I can't climb without my arm. I stretched my sore shoulders, then drew in a deep breath. I'm hoping to mend your arm. Don't be ridiculous. Bumblebee crept closer on the ledge. To do that, you'd need a splint, a stretcher, and an army of healers. It's impossible, I say. Feeling the break, I placed my hands gently on top of it. Although it made no difference to my second sight, I closed my eyes in concentration. With all my power, I imagined light, warm and healing, gathering within my chest. As my heart brimmed with the light, I allowed it to flow down my arms and into my fingers. Like invisible rivers of warmth, the light flowed out of me and into Rhea. Oh, she sighed, that feels good. What are you doing? I'm just doing what a wise friend once told me to do, listening to the language of the wound. She smiled, leaning back against the rocky ledge. Don't be fooled, warned Bumblebee. If you feel better now, it's only because you're going to feel 10 times worse later on. I don't care, you old bother. It feels stronger already. She started to lift her arm. Don't, I ordered. Not yet. As the warm light continued to pour out of my fingertips, I concentrated on the bones and muscles beneath her skin. Patiently, carefully, I felt each strand of tissue with my mind. Each strand I touched with gentleness, coaxing it to be strong again, to be whole again. One by one, I bathed the sinews, smoothed them, and knitted them back into place. Finally, I removed my hands. Rhea raised her arm. She wiggled her fingers. Then she flung her arms around my neck, squeezing with all the strength of a bear. How did you do that? She asked as she released me. I really don't know. I tapped the knotted top of my staff. But I think it might be another verse in the song of binding. She released me. You have truly found the soul of the song. Your mother, the healer, would be proud. Her words jolted me. Come, we have less than a week left. I want to get to Slantos Village before tomorrow morning. Okay. That is the end of chapter 20, everybody. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you join me again tomorrow for chapter 21. It's called The Shriek. So come join me then. I'll start reading at 9 p.m. Pacific time. Have a good night.